Hey Mike, you've actually been researching Bigfoot and Yeti since 1952. Can you tell us about some of the stuff that you have from back in those days?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I did just run across the stuff, going through some old boxes and things recently, trying to get the museum better organized and see what other things I might want to exhibit. And I found this is my original scrapbook. This is what I got back in the around the same time. It was after the footprints were photographed on Mount Everest. So that was in '51. And I think it was 52 or so when I got this scrapbook and decided to start saving these kinds of things. Now, it's all out of whack, and the stuff, things have been glued in here, and some of them are taped, and they're coming apart, and it's kind of a mess. But see, it's got these old Xeroxes back when you used to have take a photocopy of it with this paper with the toner and all this stuff. It was a wet process. It was a mess, and these things, as you can see, don't hold up very well. But here's an article, for example, from 1957 that was in True magazine, and it's one of the earlier articles. These are old articles that date back, even earlier than that. And these, I was going into to the Stanford library and going down into the microfilm when I got there, and added a lot more stuff to this kind of after the fact. Because what I had done is I'd put things in, some had been taped in, other things were just crammed in here. But also my mom at that time was helping me, and I never was much of a typist. My mom typed up these articles for me that I couldn't photocopy, and helped me start my scrapbook. Because like I said, I was just a little kid, and I was about 5 years old, 6 years old when I started collecting this stuff. And there's one thing I wanted to show you here, because this pointed something out to me that I want to also tie in with the Patterson-Gimlin filming event. Some people have said he was looking for a money shot. He went and shot this thing. Actually, what Patterson was doing was he was doing genuine Bigfoot research, and he was going to places where he thought he was most likely to find a Bigfoot that he could film. And they actually had fresh tracks found down there just a week or 10 days prior to he and Gimlin going there. So what I want to show you here is these articles that were in the San Francisco Chronicle in the mid-'60s, 1965. And I as a teenager, I was just waiting each day to pick up the latest copy of this, because you got to remember, back in the day, back in this time, we had no internet. You couldn't go to Google and find anything you wanted on Bigfoot in 2 seconds. Everything you found out, everything you got, the research materials and all of this were hard to come by. You had to go look for it. You had to go after people and you had to read these books and what have you. And that's all we had to go by. It was much more difficult. But anyway, here we are in the mid-'60s, and there's this whole series of articles about what they called, in here, the Dread Man Animal. Let me see. Giants of the Northwest. They used all these different colorful terms. The Mountain Giants, Animal Men of the Northwest. Jim McLaren, I think, was credited as the first to call it the man animal, the Bigfoot, and he had a statue he carved up in Willow Creek, which started their town being known as the Bigfoot town. Here it is. They saw the Dread Man Animal. So you can see, this is what people were talking about in the Bay Area back in 1965. And I was doing my research totally on my own. There was a group at that time of people in the Bay Area that were studying and getting together and talking about it, but I wasn't aware of their existence and never hooked up with them. I was doing independent stuff. Here they talk about psyching the giants, so the talk about telepathy and Bigfoot started way back then, back in the 60s, and that's nothing new either. But what's interesting here now is this a Dread Man Animal. There's a picture that was sent in to the Chronicle. So this was in '65. Now, I left Stanford in 1968. So I went there about the time that this was happening. I was becoming an undergraduate at Stanford, this, that, and the other thing. And while I was at Stanford, I was first declared an art major, and then I tried to do a second major in physical anthropology, but that didn't work out, and that's a previous story I think I already told. But anyway, I did work on the college humor magazine, and I started on there as a cartoonist doing drawings, and then eventually I became the editor of the magazine. And it was one of the things that the magazine did, and this was, like I say, it's a campus humor magazine. It's called the Stanford Chaparral, and during that time it was a tradition to do some kind of a parody each year as part of the offerings of the magazines you put out. Each editor put out about 4 editions or so, and one was usually a parody. Layboy was the most famous of those. But I did a parody that was very similar, and this was based on things like True magazine, Saga magazine, some of the older, very typical 1950s men's magazines. Well, back in the late 40s and early 50s, of course, there was always Nazis on the cover. So you have the Nazi who's torturing the maiden, and the guy with the Tommy gun is the emblem of the Chaparral. That's called the Old Boy. So the editor of the Chaparral is known during his tenure as the Old Boy, and at functions he will wear the jester's cap and don that persona. So here's the parody going on here, and if you look at the bottom here, you'll see growing tracks the dread man animal. So I had been inspired by these articles in the Chronicle, and I decided to do a parody article for this magazine because it was appropriate. True magazine did lots of articles about Bigfoot and that sort of thing. So in here you'll find Bring Back the Dread Man Animal Alive, Growing on Safari. And this is the story tells of how 2 men get together and they travel to the Trinity Alps to essentially the Bluff Creek area, and they hunt for and eventually discover the dread man animal. Now along the way they of course have to overcome great perils. There's dinosaurs that they have to deal with. That's a lost world kind of a place. They discover the use of tools by the Bigfoot. We've got a toilet in a redwood tree. And this is actually myself as the persona of Sir Harry Simeon. Once again, it's a parody. This is all for laughs. And I'm the intrepid hunter who has discovered the lair of the dread man animal, who turns out to be none other than... Now, this was a political statement. This is George Lincoln Rockwell, the face on the beast. And he was the man who started the neo-Nazi party. And this was, of course, our statement stating that this guy, in essence, was kind of a man-animal himself. So that's the little parody, but what I want to point out is that this grew out of this whole energy in the Bay Area during that time, and the knowledge that Bluff Creek was the place to go to hunt for a Bigfoot. And that's why the story took place there, and actually this story is a harbinger of things to come, as we've essentially, in essence, talked about the event that happened just a few months later, because this magazine was published in April of 1967, so my little parody story is actually like a prediction of the Patterson and Gimlin event. And I just thought that was an interesting little tidbit. And one of the typical things I did during my time at Stanford working on the humor magazine is I would make little comments about mystery primates in various places. And here, where you have the real credits, there's a sentence at the bottom. It says, "Take a Yeti out to lunch this month." So I was always doing little subtle things to try and convince and let the public know that these things do indeed exist.